Back then today with another updated levelling guide for Last Epoch for patch 1.1. For today's video, we'll show off one of the quickest and easiest ways to level the Void Knight Mastery from level 1 to 80. The build that we will be using here is a spin to win Echo Void Knight, so we'll be spinning all over the screen and we'll only occasionally stop to cast Void Cleave and also Volatile Reversal to take out elites or bosses. It's one of my favourite levelling builds, very simple setup to follow, and it involves 0 skill swaps. Now before we do go in and we start breaking it all down, I will mention that with patch 1.1 we've seen a few changes to the passive tree for the Void Knight, a pretty large change to how Warpath or main skill works in regards to mana regen, so we will cover all that in the video as well. Now let's dive in and let's start breaking all this down. We start off here then with a general progression infographic. Now this hasn't changed since patch 1.0, so we'll just quickly run over this. At level 2 you'll use Warpath as your main skill. When you run out of mana, which you will do with the changes, you'll fall back on Vengeance or Rive. They both cost 0 mana. At level 4 you'll spec into Warpath and you'll add Lunge to your bar. Later on in the video I'll talk about the point allocation when you specialise into a skill. Next up, you add Rebuke to your bar when you get 5 points into Sentinel, and that's a great defensive skill. At level 8 you'll spec into Rebuke. At round about level 16 you unlock the Void Knight Mastery. At level 19 you'll add Void Cleave to your bar and you'll use this on elites and bosses to take out a big chunk of their health. At level 20 you'll spec into Void Cleave. You'll then add Volatile Reversal to your bar when you have 5 points in Void Knight. At level 35 you'll spec into Volatile Reversal, and when you have 30 points in Void Knight you'll add Anomaly to your bar and we want to auto cast this, and then finally at level 50 you will spec into Anomaly. So that's the general progression. Let's look at some gear that you want to keep an eye out for now. For this section here we'll run over some useful levelling gear that you want to keep an eye out for that will really help speed up your levelling for this setup. Also, based on feedback from previous videos, we'll have a quick breakdown of useful stats that you want to keep an eye out for as well. So we'll start off with the stats first here. You have Strength, provides us with damage, and on top of that as well it will increase your armour. In regards to other damage types that you're looking for, melee void damage is fantastic for the setup. Vitality can work really nice with us because we had a change to a passive called Eternal Form that now has a threshold bonus that means Vitality gives you an additional 2 health per point of Vitality as well, so that all adds up. Movement speed is great for this setup, and lastly mana regen can help out because of changes to Warpath. It now costs more to channel, however you can actually regen your mana whilst you are channeling it, so you will need to find mana regen on a few gear pieces as well. In regards to gear, we'll start off with useful weapons to look out for, so it's all about the two-handed weapons with this setup. The Hammer of Laurent can be equipped at level 1, this is a fantastic starting weapon, it really will help you out if you get this, and also when you level up you'll gain additional melee damage as well. Ideally though you will be looking for a Dream Form. This is equipable from level 15, it's a common drop, this is perfect and you can use this all the way up to level 80 to be honest. So you've got your flat melee damage on it, you've got melee void damage, you've got void penetration, and it even gives you block chance as well. Just an amazing low level unique. For the amulet slot we have the trusty Bleeding Heart, equipable at level 4. This increases your melee attack speed, and the main reason we're using it really is for the up to 9% of damage leached as health, which is just amazing for survivability. For the body armour slot, 2 uniques worth looking out for. You've got the Kestrel, equipable at level 1, doesn't provide much survivability at all, but it does give you a movement speed boost and a chance to gain haste, so early game this really can give you a nice little boost on your movement speed. You will find that you will need some survivability pretty quickly because the Kestrel doesn't offer much. This is where the Titan Heart can be great. Equipable at level 41, you can see with this you've got additional armour as a modifier and you take 15% less damage when you're wielding a two-handed weapon. On top of that you've got increased health and increased melee damage as well, so great unique for us. For the belt slot here we have 2 items. You have the Thorn Slinger, equipable at level 12. Around about this point you shouldn't have converted Warpath to Void yet, so this is why this works for us. It gives us a +1 to the level of physical skills, so that will affect Warpath, and it gives us a little bit of movement speed as well. If they feel that you need a little bit of survivability, the Isadora's Tomb Binding can actually be really nice. This is equipable at level 19, it will give you up to 300 armour, and on top of that as well you can get up to 35% increased armour. So yeah, survivability wise, at level 19 this can be really nice. For the ring slot, we have 3 that can be useful here. The first one is the Arboreal Circuit, equipable at level 1. Each of these with max rolls gives you 18% movement speed, so if you have 2 of these equipped, that's 36% increase in your movement speed straight away from level 1. Sticking with movement speed here, we have the Quicksilver Coil, equipable at level 12. You've got increased movement speed as implicit, but you've also got increased melee attack speed and a chance to gain haste on hit as well. Finishing up the rings here, if you're struggling a little bit for elemental resistance, this can work out nice. It's Leah's Signet, equipable at level 45. You can see the modifier on this gives you 75% elemental resistance while you're channeling, so that's whilst you're using Warpath. So if you add all that up, that's the equivalent of 225 elemental resistance you're getting from one weapon. Of course that's spread over the 3 different types, but it's still pretty nice if you are struggling in that area. Moving on to the final item slot here, we have 4 different uniques you want to keep an eye out for. One of them is new with patch 1.1. We start off however with Lessons of the Metropolis, equipable at level 1. This can give you a nice movement speed increase. The next unique here is the Flight of the Quercy, equipable at level 14. This is a common drop, new with patch 1.1. It gives you an additional evade charge, it reduces the cooldown recovery speed for evade, and after you use evade you'll gain haste for a few seconds as well, so this can be nice for zipping around the levels. We then have the Advent of the Erased Weaver's Will item, equipable at level 16, quite similar to the last item in that you can proc haste with this. The difference with, rather than evading, you'll proc haste, or you'll have a chance to proc haste when a nearby enemy dies, and it's got additional movement speed as a modifier as well as the implicit as well. Finishing up the items here, we have the Dark Stride, equipable at level 19. This is fantastic for this setup. So you've got nice implicits, modifiers are increased movement speed, another charge for Void Cleave, flat melee void damage. You'll gain increased movement speed based on your flat melee void damage that's added to your build, and then increased void damage as well. So really pretty amazing, this one. Now let's just finish up this section very quickly by looking at some idols you want to keep an eye out for. We start off with the small idol here. The modifier that you want to keep an eye out for would be the bottom one, which is increased void damage. That's up to 8%. We then have the grand idol. This one can be great for us. It offers us up to 20% increased warpath area, which is fantastic, as well as up to 60% increased melee void damage. We then have the Ornate Idol. The first modifier is up to 150% increased echo damage when a skill is echoed, and up to 90% increased melee void damage. The final idol slot we have here is the Adorned Idol. So with this you can gain increased void damage if you've echoed recently, and a chance to shred armour on melee hit as well. Now before we finish up here, another quick infographic summary. So this is your stat priority and useful levelling gear you want to keep an eye out for. The next section will run over some useful blessings you want to use on this setup. With patch 1.1 we got a really nice change to the blessing system. We now have a blessing library, making it much easier to access these. So for this reason I'll actually talk about the different monoliths that offer a stat boost and the preferred stat that you want to look out for whilst levelling. So from Fall of the Outcast you will of course go for experience. The Black Sun you can get increased void damage. From Ending the Storm, the best one you can go for would probably be mana, just to help your issues when you're channeling Warpath. You've then got Reign of Dragons. This can give you all resistances, crit strike avoidance, or melee damage leech, just various different types of defence. You've got the Age of Winter, can give you increased armour, and then Spirits of Fire, this one is perfect for us. It's increased armour while channeling. It can give us a fair amount here. So that is the blessings. Let's go on now and let's talk about the passive point allocation. For the passive point progression here, we'll be using the awesome Last Epoch tools. I've got a link to this particular planner in the description below, and you can see that I've actually planned out the order that you want to put your points into the different nodes. Now, not many changes from patch 1.0 with this one. There's actually only one or two very slight changes, but we'll quickly run over the nodes here. You start off 8 points into Juggernaut. It gives you plus 8 to strength as well as fire and void resistance. We have 5 points into Armour Clad, gives you increased armour, and more importantly it gives you 10% reduced damage from nearby enemies. And then we have 7 points into Relentless. It gives us increased damage and stun avoidance as well. Now let's move on to the Void Knight Mastery. Just before we do break down the nodes here, I will mention one change with 1.1. So the passive bonus, previously this used to be when you spec'd into the Void Knight Mastery, a flat 75% increased melee void damage. It's now changed so that you gain 1% more melee void damage per free vitality. So more is your better multiplier than your increased multiplier, and you get that via stacking health, so that can be pretty nice there. But to break down the nodes, we have 5 points into Temporal Corruption, gives us additional flat void damage. We have 5 points into World Eater for some survivability with leech on void and melee damage. 1 point into Void Corruption. This gives us, with the setup we're running, 73% critical multiplier for only 1 point, so that is amazing. We have 8 points into Void Blades, so that's a flat 24 melee void damage, great early game. 8 points into Doom Knight, that gives us strength as well as health. We have 12 points into Woe, so that's increased melee damage, increased void damage and melee kill, and also increased armour on melee kill. 4 points into Singular Purpose, increased void damage. It will take away the small block chance we have on Dreamform if we are using it, but it's worth it for the increased void damage. We then have a node that was changed with 1.1, the Threshold bonus was added, so this gives you 10 vitality, 20% increased health, and with 5 points into it, although we'll max it out, but with 5 points you get additional health per point of vitality. It gives you another 2 additional health, so this is really pretty great. Now if we go up here, we've got Echo and Strikes, so it gives us a 10% echo chance. Echoes allow us to spin about and leave an echo behind you to take out enemies, so it allows you to keep moving. We then get Time Legion, so it's increased melee attack speed, time not chance, and another 10% echo chance. We've got 1 point into Avatar of Regret. It will reduce your attack speed and it increases your mana cost, but it gives you another 10% echo chance there, so that's 30% in total we've got. And then our remaining 4 points I would put into Dread. It gives you increased void damage and movement speed as well. So that's the passive trees. Let's talk about the skills now. So the skills we're using here are the same ones we used for patch 1.0. The only skill that's really been changed with patch 1.1 is Warpath. So previously this particular one would cost 10 mana per second to actually channel it, and now costs 18 mana per second. However, the difference is you can generate mana whilst you are channeling it. So in order to keep it so you can basically use it without running out of mana at all, then you just want to get a couple of gear pieces that have got mana regen on them. But in regards to the point allocation here, you can put 2 points into Unchained. That allows you 1 point into Reckless Spin, so that reduces the mana cost overall of the skill to -10. If you feel you need a bit more mana cost reduction, then you just place additional points into here, but for the time being I would use these and go for mana regen. So you start off with that. We then have 3 points into Quicksilver Wind. It gives you an increased 30% move speed. We have 5 points into Void Spiral. It gives you a fair amount of melee void damage. 1 point into Echo Knight. That allows Warpath to echo and it gives you increased void damage as well. 1 point into Apocalypse Whirl. This will convert your Warpath from physical to void, so really important for this setup. We have 1 point into Iron Reach, increases the area on Warpath. 5 points into Whirling Steel. It gives us an additional 40% more damage, but that is actually doubled if we're using a two-handed weapon, so that's 80% more damage, which is huge. And then 1 point into Blade Master's Blade, just for some additional area on here. If you feel you don't need it, you need a bit of mana, as mentioned, just drop some of your additional points into this one here. The next skill we have here is Rebuke. No changes with 1.1, however with 1.0 the cooldown on it was increased, but with the setup we're using here we can pull that back down again. Starting off, we have 2 points into Bide. It gives you 24% increased duration that you can channel this, and it's great for avoiding one-shots. We have 2 points into Regenerative Shell. We're not really using that, but it allows us 4 points into Brave the Elements. So when we're channeling Rebuke we take 60% less elemental damage. Augmented Plating means we have 75% more armour when we're channeling it, which is amazing. 3 points into Mystic Aegis, this will reduce the cooldown on it, makes it cost a little bit more mana, but it is worthwhile. 1 point into Retaliation allows us 3 points into Reclaimed Refuge. So with this one, when you use another melee attack, it will help reduce the cooldown on Rebuke, so it's available more often. So it's not an ability you will be using all the time, but if you're moving about the screen, you can't get out a one shot of a boss, then just hold this down and you'll be able to tank it no problem. The next skill we have here is Void Cleave. This didn't see any changes with patch 1.1, and we'll use this against elites and bosses to take away a large chunk of their health. Looking at the point allocation, 2 points into the Depths, 1 point into Abyssal Walker, then allows us 4 points into Momentum. That means that after we're channeling Warpath for 2 seconds, it will give us an additional 80% more damage on our Void Cleave. We have 1 point into Precognition, allowing us 5 points into Crushing Echo. So with this, Void Cleave deals additional void damage, 75 flat, which is a huge amount. However, if this skill echoes, then that's tripled, which is just amazing. That's 225 additional flat damage for an echoed Void Cleave. We have 3 points into Riftmaker. It's giving you your crit vulnerability stacks and increased crit chance. And then we finish up with 4 points into Champion of the Void. So that's increased critical multiplier, 200% for this particular skill, and we'll gain some mana when we use it as well. Our next skill is Volatile Reversal. Again, no changes with 1.1. You can use this in various different ways. I like to use it essentially against a boss if I'm close to them, and it allows me to do additional damage to them. So our point allocation, we have 1 point into Incipient Void Drift, so you'll create a Void Drift when you start off this ability. We have 4 points into Shifting Power. This increases the stun chance of your Void Drift, and also you do additional global void damage versus stunned enemies. We have 1 point into Terminal Void Drift, so when you arrive you actually cast a Void Drift as well. 4 points into Food for Worms, so this increases the time rot chance of this particular skill and the global void damage you deal per stack of time rot on the enemy. We have 3 points into Dark Expanse. We put the 3 points into that because it allows us 3 points into Harbinger of Dust. With this one, the enemy that's affected by the Void Drift will take additional damage up to 30% there. 2 points into Traveller's Fatigue. Brings down the cooldown recovery speed on this, and then our final 2 points into Ancient Reversal. That increases the reversal time when you use this particular skill. The final skill we have here is Anomaly. No changes with 1.1. You'll want to auto cast this skill, and it puts a bubble on you that's got various different bonuses. But starting off, we have 4 points into a mission. It allows us 1 point into Borrowed Time, which gives us the instant cast, which means we can actually cast it on auto cast without it interrupting our warpath. So that is really important. We then have 1 point into Void Touch. That allows us 1 point into Immediacy. So that means when you use this skill, it's not going to send the enemies forward in time, making them disappear, which I find to be a bit of a pain. It means they stay there so you can take them out. We have 1 point into Time Bubble. So this gives you the bubble that will actually go round and follow your character. We have 4 points into Temporal Master. So the time bubble lasts longer. 1 point into Time Lord, so the bubbles cast on you, and again it will follow you while you're moving about. We have 5 points into Decimation. It gives you increased critical chance, 150% when you've got the bubble on you. And then finally 2 points into Manipulation. So with this it gives you increased attack speed once again while that bubble that is following you is on you. So that is one of the quickest and easiest ways to level the Void Knight Mastery in patch 1.1 for Last Epoch. There are other leveling guides on the channel as well, so feel free to check them out, and if this has been helpful, please do take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. But thanks for tuning in, stay safe, I'll see you all again soon.